Welcome to Clocking In, Voices of NC Manufacturing. I'm your host, Phil Mintz, Director of the North Carolina Manufacturing Extension Partnership, otherwise known as NCMEP. My role is to drive outreach to NC manufacturers, build relationships to federal and state leaders, and coordinate efforts to drive profitable manufacturing growth in North Carolina. Throughout my time working closely with manufacturers, I have heard the most quirky, curious, and memorable stories. I wanted to turn these stories into a podcast so that others may hear and be informed and inspired. From humble beginnings to manufacturing titans, from tragedy to triumph, I will be interviewing some of these manufacturers who have made North Carolina manufacturing the powerhouse that it is today. In case you didn't know it, hosiery mills accounted for a substantial part of North Carolina's dominant textile industry in the 20th century. By the 1940s, over 60% of the state's textile and hosiery facilities were concentrated in Alamance, Guilford, Catawba, Randolph, Davidson, and Burke counties. Once nearly given up for dead, the hosiery manufacturing industry in the U.S. has been able to sustain and even thrive due to significant advancements in technology. North Carolina remains a key producer of hosiery products today. On this episode of Clocking In, we're speaking with a hosiery manufacturer headquartered in Randolph County, an area rich with textile and hosiery history. Established in Asheboro, North Carolina in 1989, Elastic Therapy Incorporated is a world leader in the design and manufacture of private label compression products. Their products are worn to aid in the treatment and prevention of vein-related disorders. ETI started with 25 associates working to manufacture medical compression products on 30 knitting machines. Today, ETI maintains 250 employees working with more than 200 knitting machines and producing millions of medical hosiery products annually. Today, we're clocking into a conversation with Chris Harrington, the Director of Operations and General Manager of Elastic Therapy. His previous positions include General Manager at Technicolor, Vice President of Operations at Sony Digital Audio Disc Corporation, and the Head of North America Operations at Draeger Safety. Chris has a Bachelor's in Organizational Management from Creighton College, a Master's of Business Administration from the University of Tennessee, and a doctorate in philosophy and leadership studies from North Carolina A&T State University. Chris, thanks for taking time to speak with us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Phil. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. Well, kind of at first glance, it appears that your career journey is taking you through some interesting advancements there. I mean, those are as old as me can remember Technicolor as somewhat of a groundbreaking visual experience on film and television. Then, of course, you had the digital audio disc industry, but now you're in hosiery. So can you explain that journey a little bit and how you got to where you are today?
You know, the interesting thing about Technicolor and Sony, it was a packaged media industry as it, grew from video cassettes through DVDs, ultimately to Blu-ray. And when I was in the industry, it was growing 700-800% year over year. So the common theme there was growth and change, lots of change. I chose to leave that industry when it had peaked and was already starting the decline because of technology. The connection, if any, I guess, from that industry to textiles is that I didn't think textiles was going to go away, right? It seemed like it was a safer bet. And then more specifically with elastic therapy, because while it's textiles for sure, it's also medical devices. And there's a grander purpose behind the product. And because of that niche, harder to offshore.
Talk a little bit about elastic therapy and kind of what your role is there and what the business does.
So elastic therapy, we're private label manufacturers, as you noted. Ultimately, what that means is you're not going to find an elastic therapy brand, right? So we're going to make for other people whose role in the value chain, if you will, is to market and distribute products. And our role is to design and manufacture. We do that role, we do it well, and we service customers, all over the globe. The interesting thing about our products, again, it's a medical device. It's the gold standard for preventing and treating venous disease and lymphatic disease. If you think about preventing DVTs, or whether it's travel related or even post-op in the hospitals, so the stockings that they put on post-op, those are the types of products that we manufacture. And elastic therapy, it was a family business that was acquired by DJO Global in 2011. And so really my role kind of from the beginning was more of an integration role. And what ultimately I discovered that the greatest need was somewhat transforming the culture, right? Great team, lots of knowledge, but they did what they always did. And so it was really helping to bridge the gap and to, more some current ways of doing things, and really helping the team, kind of open their minds to what could be, and really transforming it to more of a learning culture, and really developing the team.
You described your products there as a medical device. Does that mean you have to get certified by FDA and some of the other special things that come with the term medical?
So our products are absolutely FDA registered. In the US, there is not a standard, if you will, for compression. So there's two medical classes of device. A class 1 medical device, essentially the indication is that it helps tired, achy legs, that type of thing. And a class 2 medical device, the claims are that it treats and prevents blood pooling, the DVT. So it's pretty interesting that globally there's 3 standards for compression. The U.S. doesn't have one. So in the U.S. it's really a matter of marketing claims. But the other standards there's a German standard, a French standard, and a British standard. We're the only U.S. manufacturer. There's European manufacturers that have U.S. presence, but we are the only U.S. manufacturer that's certified to the 3 global standards. And in fact, we're the only U.S. manufacturer that's been accepted as a member of the German Quality Mark Association, which is the certifying body for the German standard.
Wow. I mentioned at the intro, how the hosiery industry has benefited from technological advancements. I'm old enough to remember back whenever you had to sew a toe together for a sock. I guess with that, plus being in sort of a niche, that gives you an opportunity to be competitive here in the States. Is that kind of where we are with the hosiery industry these days?
There's the unfortunate reality is that because of the nature of our product, both because of the technical nature and just the composite. A regular hosiery typically would have 2 to 5% elastane or spandex in it. Our product typically has 20% or more. And the dynamic that creates is it really eliminates the possibility or greatly reduces the possibility of automation. It is still fairly labor intensive, but because of the nature of it, and also one of the things that we've done, we look at kind of the total value to the customer. It's a combination of order quantity, lead times, and the high quality. So when you couple those things together, we're very competitive even with Asia. In fact, some of our global customers, we service customers in the UK. We actually have 2 different customers in Japan, and we do a lot of business with South Korea. It's probably people would not normally associate textiles exporting to Asia, but that in fact is the case.
That's pretty amazing there. Do you think that's accelerating, or is just you're able to do that because of the nature of the work that you do? From a broader perspective, what does the hosiery industry look like, and how does it advance? I mean, is it something that we'll continue to be able to hold on to, you think?
So again, my knowledge is more limited, I would say, to the compression segment of the hosiery. But what I would say is that they have made some pretty good strides in the last 10 years with knitting and sewing technology, kind of to your comment about sewing the toes closed. There's equipment out there, and we have some as well for some types of product where you can close the toe as it's being knit. Of course, that takes out a step and some cost. So I think that obviously helps the U.S. to become more competitive. I think more broadly, when I think about technology, especially in our segment, from a product standpoint, just higher technology yarns. There's some work being done with infrared yarns to try to help retain body heat. There's some work that's been done, but it wasn't commercially viable quite yet for conductive yarns. There's work being done with flexible electronics, where possibly we'll be able to attach some sort of a small patch type sensor and connect to maybe a smartphone. There's some yarns that have been developed here in North Carolina that are treated with medicine such as capsaicin, so that it's a dual purpose type product. So there are those increases in technology. But then I think the other thing that we're actively exploring is the Internet of Things from a manufacturing perspective, right? So we've got a lot of manufacturing equipment. We've got well over 200 knitting machines and a lot of different finishing equipment, but it doesn't connect to any meaningful database or visual management board. For us, that's a big opportunity. And frankly, I see that opportunity not only in textiles, but in manufacturing in general, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of manufacturers out there that, maybe they've got 20-year-old equipment that's far from its end of useful life, but it's not connected to anything. How do we bridge that gap? How do we use the data that's generated by all of the equipment to improve our processes, improve our yield, and those types of things.
It's funny you should say that, because that's one of the things that we're working on as the MVP program, is to try to help figure out ways to bridge that gap, especially with a lot of our smaller manufacturing industries. And we'll stay tuned for some of that. I'd be remiss without talking about our current state of environmental affairs today. We're here approaching the fall of 2021, and for the better part of a year and a half, we've been dealing with this little thing called the virus. And, I'm curious, again, it's always interesting to hear how organizations have been managing through the virus, because, the most intriguing thing for me, and I guess to you also, it seems like throughout the pandemic, demand for goods and services has been just through the roof. So it's really kind of an odd phenomenon. So how have you been working through that?
We quickly navigated registering as an essential business even before I think virtually all manufacturers ultimately had that status. But because we were a medical devices company, we never shut down. We never shut down. Now, from a people standpoint first, we had to do a lot of different things to try to keep our associates safe. We've got a lot of plexiglass in the plant where we couldn't physically distance them. We quickly developed some masks, which was a challenge because of our type of knitting equipment, but we were successful in that. We actually produced masks, probably about 40 or 50,000 for all of our parent companies' employees, and shipped them around the world when they just weren't readily available. We did a lot to keep our associates safe. And then, frankly, in 2020, we did see a decline in our overall demand. And that's just related to some of our customers, the sales channels that they serve were more brick and mortar. The customers that sold more through e-commerce did better than those that sold through brick and mortar. This year, that demand is rebounded tremendously. In fact, I would say our domestic volume is up, in fact, probably better than 2019. Now, our international business is not rebounded quite as well, but that kind of makes sense. If you think about where we are related to the rest of the world from a COVID standpoint, as some have called it, we're vaccine privileged, meaning that we have the privilege of whether we take the vaccine or not, where most countries still don't have the vaccine available. So our customers are still in that situation. A lot of their business is still hurting.
Yeah, I guess that's an interesting point. If you're selling globally, you're subject to the dynamics of wherever you sell,
Yeah.
not necessarily where you live. And so I guess that's something that we all should be thinking about, really, in that regard. What's in the future for ETI? I mean, is there new areas of growth that you're looking at, or what are the things that change in your arena that allows you to do something different?
One thing I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about, I missed our internal supply. So internal supply for us, our main supply, of course, is yarn. That has been a challenge, and it really goes back to the chemicals and the resins. I would say, like most other businesses, we have painstakingly been dealing with supply shortfalls, supply delays, and price increases. And that's despite the fact that 99% of our yarns are sourced locally. But, so we're sourcing mainly covered yarns. So that those are all coming from generally within 100 miles of us.
Wow.
But, a lot of their sources, either the resins or the supply has moved offshore. Even the Lycra company, they offshored most of their production to Ireland. That's been a challenge.
Wow. So is it fair to say that most of the supply chain problems can be traced back to imports from offshore? I mean, eventually.
Yeah, I would say that that's the majority of it, but a lot of our local partners, I would say it that way, are experiencing labor shortages as well.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, most of the yarn coverers, and they're getting quite generous with how they're trying to recruit and things of that nature. But they've had certainly some labor challenges. Back to your question on where do I see us going? I believe the bigger opportunities, honestly, for us, especially given the lack of a U.S. standard, a lot of our opportunities are going to be international. And the fact that we've achieved this German standard and we made an investment in the test device that is used to certify to the German standard, I think that's a big opportunity for us. We're doing a lot of work with U.S. trade representatives and just really exploring, how do we, what are the right countries for us to go after where we don't have a presence, and how do we expand on that? I mean, if you think about it from the U.S. represents about 4% of the world population, and much of the world population is, especially in more developed countries, is aging out like we are in the U.S. That's a pretty good demographic for our products.
Yeah, great. Before we go, I do want to acknowledge your success from the academic standpoint. We've been traveling some of the same circles there academically, and you recently were successful in getting your PhD, and I want to congratulate you on that, Dr. Herring. And again, there's always a lot to learn. And that there's that program that I'm actually involved in to some degree at this point in time. It seems to be a very interesting program. Is there something that you feel like you get from that that you can apply to what you do now? The leadership studies program at North Carolina A&T, and really when I thought about pursuing my doctorate, the aim was really to at some point pivot to academia and maybe do some teaching myself. But I got some really good advice. The advice was that if you're going to pursue your PhD, make sure it's something that you're truly passionate about. And over the years, when I found myself reading something other than just for the sheer pleasure, it was always about leadership, always trying to improve my leadership practice, learn more about leadership. Ultimately, that's why I chose the leadership studies program.
Probably doing a Doctor of Business Administration in some ways would have been easier, but I don't think it would have been as interesting. And for me, it was twofold. One, learn more about my practice and how to hopefully practice better. But also, it's just an area of passion for me, and really, I'll say the art of influencing people and supporting people.
Yeah, well, obviously the way things are changing these days, there's a lot of roles for leadership studies and understanding how that works. That's for sure. And yeah, so Chris, we really do appreciate you taking your time to join us today on this. And we always learn a lot from our guests, and this is no different than what we always do. We wish you continued success with ETI and other endeavors that you may be involved in. And thanks for joining us on the program. Dr. Chris Harrington from Elastic Therapy.
Thank you very much, Phil. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you for joining today's Clocking In, Voices of NC Manufacturing. This podcast is brought to you by NC State's College of Engineering, the North Carolina Manufacturing Extension Partnership, and Industry Expansion Solutions. If you'd like to learn more about the solutions NCMEP offers, go to www.ncmep.org. Want to listen to previous Clocking In podcasts? Go to ncmep.org/clockingin.